So this morning we've celebrated districts and we've celebrated leaders, and I will tell you none of this work is possible without great leadership, without visionary leadership. And as an organization, we have been incredibly gifted over these last 14, almost 15 years to be led by a gentleman who understands leadership, to be led by a man who has a deep passion for public schools, who has a deep passion for all of us, who believes in the power of the work we do. Now, Mort mentioned this yesterday, and I'm going to mention it again. You all know that Dan is going to be retiring soon, and he's so thankful that I'm up here talking about this, because what he wanted me to say was, here is Dan, but I'm not going to do that, Dan. I apologize. But we are all in Dan's debt, because the work of Learning 2025 started with his vision, with him saying, you know what, we're in the middle of a pandemic, we're in the middle of a crisis. I know a lot of leaders who would only be focused on whether we mask or not, but not Dan. Dan's like, you know what? Now's the time to do the work of having the hard conversations about how we transform our schools, and that is leadership. And he has done that work for us over a decade and a half, and he's done that work for public schools for over 50 years. And so I want all of us to welcome Dan to the stage and also thank him for a lifetime in service to our public schools and our children. Dan, thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Paul. You know, I am so fortunate because the only time you get the kinds of accolades that I've been getting now and probably through February of next year is at your funeral. And here I am, I'm still alive, and I get to hear it all. This is great. And it is great to be with you today and to look at this ballroom filled with so many educators and representing so many school districts, just a little over a year after Bill and I have to recognize Bill Daggett as my partner in getting this whole process going. And here we are. And this really makes me feel very, very good that we were able to accomplish this while I'm still here. So, you know, I love to read. I'm a reader. And for years, every book I bought had to be a hardcover. I wanted that sucker hardcover book, and I wanted to read it. And fortunately, I lived in this very large house that had a very large library. And I would take that book and I would put it up on my shelf as another one. And I would walk into that room, I'd look around and I'd go, wow. Look at all the books I've read. My wife, who is much more into technology than I am, started reading a thing called a Kindle. And she says to me one day, Dan, says, all of the traveling that you do, all of the meetings that you go to, and everywhere you go, in your case, you have to carry this heavy, big book. Why don't you switch to Kindle? And I go, honey, come on. I smell the book. I feel the book. You know, I stroke the book. I love the book. So at one point, you know, we have a very large family. I'm fortunate to have 4 children. My oldest 3 have given me 12 grandchildren. My oldest grandchild has given me 2 great-grandchildren. And my next in line grandchild is married, and his wife just announced that she's pregnant, so that will be grandchild number 3. I have a very large family. And, you know, we love spending time with them. So we're an empty house beautiful house, over 8,000 square feet, a huge library. And she says to me, "What are we doing here? It's just two of us. Have you ever gone to the bedroom on the top right?" I go, "No." She said, "Well, have you ever gone to the bedroom on the top left?" "No." And we started going through rooms in the house and realized that there were only two places that we went to: the kitchen, the bedroom, and then, of course, the TV room. And the rest of the house was empty. So we decided to sell the house, of course, and downsize. So we bought a beautiful condo, 4 levels, 2,700 square feet. So we went from 8,500 square feet to 2,700. And one of the things I had to sacrifice was my library. So in this new home that we're in, all I can do is to have a bookshelf that's about, in the center of a wall. I had to get rid of all of my treasures, all of my books. I donated them, and I was happy to be able to do that, but I donated all of my books. So now here I am in a new house with a bookshelf that's already full, and my wife looks at me and says, "So what are you going to do now?" And I go, "Oh my God, I can't, why buy a book if I can't keep it and I have to give it away? All right, I'll try the Kindle." So she bought me a Kindle. Well, I have to tell you that I am a reformed man. I love the Kindle. I take that little sucker with me everywhere I go. It takes no space at all. When I want a book, I go to Amazon, I go, and boom, there it is in a flash. This is great. The moral to this story that I'm sharing with you is how hard it is for us to give up a habit, something that we have done, something that we've done because we enjoy doing it. Giving it up is very hard. In this story that I shared with you, the key thing is that I never would have given up my habit, but I had to. Necessity is the mother of invention. Because I had to, I tried something new that I poo-pooed for all of these years, and all of a sudden I find, wow, this is great. I don't have the showcase, but all of those books are in my Kindle library. They're still there. I still have them. That's, I think, something that we have to come to terms with. Necessity is the mother of invention. A lot of the things that we're talking about are major changes in education. And I love seeing the districts that we had in front of us this morning and a terrific work that you're doing. But there's an opportunity here that COVID has presented us with. COVID has forced us to do things that ordinarily we never would have done. Let's take the school calendar as an example. We have a school calendar that goes back forever. We begin school usually towards the end of August, beginning of September, through sometime in June, and the kids are off for the summer months. Forever, we have seen research that shows the problem with that there's loss of learning over 2 months of summer vacation, and when the kids come back, the teachers spend the better part of September just reviewing the work from the previous years before they can get going. It's even worse, as we know, in terms of our children that are low performing. Yet, we continue to do it. But what happened because of COVID? We had all of this loss of learning. Our calendars were blown out the window. We had school when we could, and we didn't when we couldn't. And so all of a sudden, the calendar has been rearranged. And there's a lot of districts, and there may be some of you out here, that are rethinking the calendar and going to possibly year-round schools. By the way, when I was the superintendent of schools in Fairfax County in the late 1990s, I instituted year-round schools in about 14 of our schools in Fairfax. And the people that were doing it loved it. But the problem was that parents says, "Well, Dr. Domenech, that's wonderful, but I have a child that's in a year-round school, and then my middle school and high school kids are in schools that are not." And that's really disrupting our whole calendar for the family. I had teachers that said, hey, I want those 2 months off for the summer. There was a great deal of opposition, and as you can imagine, the day I left Fairfax County, so did the year-round schools. But we are beginning to rethink it, even more so because of the loss of learning that has taken place because of COVID. So many of you now are running summer programs that are not the traditional summer school for high school kids that failed a course. You're now offering summer programs to all of your students. The problem there, though, that it's not required. It's voluntary. Kids can go and not go. And in most cases, if you're lucky, you may have half of your students attending that summer program. But here again, if we had a different calendar, we could use those summer months as part of it to catch up. It's an idea, an opportunity, because of the situation that we have. The other issue besides the calendar is seat time requirements. I mean, the majority of states still have seat time requirements. You have to be in high school so many days in the class in order to get credit for that course, regardless of how you may do at the end of year test. So it has nothing to do with performance. It has everything to do with your being present in the building. Yet this past year, and the year before, it was even worse, when so many kids couldn't be in school, were taking online courses, they still took the test at the end of the year, and if they passed, they went on to the next grade level. So we disregarded seat time requirements for that period of time. Why not disregard it altogether? Why? Another thing that came as a result of the pandemic, remote learning. And granted, no question that at the beginning of this whole process, remote learning was a huge failure for the majority of school districts in America. And why? Because that wasn't what schools were about. Schools were about in-person learning. The kids coming to school, being in the class with the teacher, not sitting home. The majority of districts didn't have the platform. The majority of teachers had not been trained, and we know how many kids did not even have the technology, how many kids were lacking a laptop, how many kids didn't have internet access at home to make this happen. So was it a disaster? Yes. There were some districts, though, that were ahead of the game, and for those districts, it was not a problem, and they were fine. But we've learned a lot over the past 2 years, and we're about to enter a fourth, by the way, school year that's been affected by the pandemic. But the reality is that if we talk about how do we accelerate learning for all the learning loss that has taken place, remote learning is very much an option for kids to be able to take courses online after school, during vacation periods. There are many districts right now, by the way, who don't do snow days anymore. Instead of a snow day, they do remote learning at home. So this is another entree, another opportunity to break the tradition and to move in a direction that makes use of what we've learned, makes use of the technology. So none of these are major changes that we would see reflected in the districts that we have here. Not the changes that focus on equity, changes that focus on student-centered, changes that focus on future-ready. The things we heard Bill speak about yesterday. By the way, I have heard Bill give that speech 10 times, and every time I sit there going, oh, wow, man, this is great. Because every time he puts in something new that I hadn't seen before. So it's a pleasure to hear. But these points that he made yesterday are significant changes that have to take place. But boy, we know education, don't we? And we know that we're going to fight like hell, like I did not to get a Kindle. We're not going to go in that direction because that's big change. We don't want to rock the boat. The teachers aren't in favor of it. The parents certainly aren't. I brought, in addition to year-round schooling, when I was in Fairfax and many of my other districts, non-graded personalized learning instruction. You know what I would hear from parents on nights when the parents were in and I would go to the school to visit, and we were doing this in first, second, and third, kindergarten, first and second grade. I had parents who'd come up to me and say, I'm sorry, Dr. Domenech, but you've got my kindergarten child in a class with first and second graders? What are you, crazy? You know, my baby is with these older kids. I don't like that. I said, oh. I said, do you have other children at home? He goes, yes. Are they older than your kindergarten child? Yes. He says, guess it must be hell for you having that situation at home. And the same was true with the second grade parents. You've got my child, a second grader with kindergarten kids? I mean, that's an insult to my child. Because that's not the way we've done it. Not that we should group children according to their ability in terms of what we're teaching them, but that we still, Horace Mann brought this to us back in the 18th century when he was the commissioner of education in Massachusetts, and he visited Vienna, and came back with this whole kindergarten grade level structure. We're still doing that. We group kindergarten kids, five graders. First grade, six-year-olds, and up the line. Completely knowing, as we've known forever, that the best way to group children is in terms of their ability to learn what we're going to present them with, but yet we still do it. We have this marvelous technology available right now that supplements what goes on in the classroom and provides all of these programs, that provides instruction that is focused directly on the ability of the child. Even better, and Bill talked about this, the artificial intelligence. I'm sure you've seen some of these programs that do have artificial intelligence that interact with the child. So as the child responds, the program adjusts to that response. If the response is wrong, the child is told the response is wrong and given clues and the opportunity for the child to give the right and then move along. That's a perfect way to tell children, to teach our children. But we're not doing that either. So there are so many things that we need to move. And by the way, not the least of all of this are the rules, regulations, and laws that prevent us from doing these things. I mentioned seat time requirements. Those are state laws. Those things have to change. When we assess our children, we continue to assess them by the grade level that they're in. And that's a problem. We don't give children the opportunity to learn. If we have the typical classroom of a teacher with 25 kids, we know that the typical form of instruction is to the middle. So we have children in the class at the top that are already familiar with it and they're bored. And we have kids at the bottom third of the class who don't know what the heck's going on. And we move on. And at the end of the year, we test them and we see what the results are. No surprise. For years, we've talked about the achievement gap. Yet we know that there's an equity issue here. We have an equity issue. I was a superintendent on Long Island for many years. Long Island, New York, in general, is a very wealthy community. We had school districts on Long Island that were spending 3 times per pupil more than a neighboring district. And those 2 districts were all held to the same standard. The students had to achieve at the same level. The district that was spending only 1/3 as much per pupil as the other district. Is that fair? It's not fair. It's not even realistic. Yet, at the federal level, we still have an assessment system that requires these things to continue to happen. So our challenge is big. Your challenge, what you're taking on, is huge because you have to deal with your staff. You have to deal with your parents, your community, and something called the Board of Education. Not a big deal, but definitely an issue. When you have a supportive board, as I was lucky to have in the districts that I was in, it was great. My board was very supportive. I instituted years ago on Long Island, in my second district, a place called South Huntington, not only full-day kindergarten, which was not a thing in those days, but childcare provided by the district. Childcare provided the district. And we were providing instruction for our special kids from birth through grade 12. And that was a long time ago. But there are still districts in this country, and today, kindergarten is still not a mandate in half of the states in this country. It's still an option. And yet we're talking about preschool education. We haven't even dealt with kindergarten as the right thing to do. So yes, we're focusing on major changes. You are here. But let's not forget the small steps, the small challenges that are there. That's an opportunity for us right now to take advantage of and make those changes. Because when we make those changes and our community begins to feel that they're comfortable with what we're introducing and what we're bringing, that will enhance the support. You know, yesterday I sat in at the Battelle session and the portrait of a graduate and the work that they do with the community in terms of bringing the community on board with your plans, because it's so important. The last thing you want to do is to go out on a limb, because when you go out on a limb, somebody's going to be there behind you cutting it. So you always have to make sure that when you're leading, that you're strategic about how you lead, that you don't go out on a limb, that you get the support from your community before you move forward to do these things. That's how you're going to get these things done. So again, for me, it's really a pleasure and a treat and a confirmation and a reaffirmation of the work that we're doing to see so many of you here. And I can tell you, I may be retiring at the conference in San Antonio in February, but I'm still going to be around, and I'm still going to be involved and doing everything that I can to support the work that you do and the work that's ahead as we try to bring an educational system that is responsive to the needs of all of our children, that is not marginalizing our kids, that is providing equity, and definitely future-driven. Thank you all very much.